Hello. This is the first part of my summary of Peter Berger's book, The Heretical Imperative. The full title is The Heretical Imperative, Contemporary Possibilities of Religious Affirmation. The book was published in 1979. There are 6 chapters: modernity as the universalization of heresy, religious experience, tradition, and reflection, and then the deductive possibility, which is the situation of reaffirming tradition, the reductive possibility, which is modernizing tradition, and the inductive possibility from tradition to experience, and then finally between Jerusalem and Benares, in which he talks about different kinds of religious experience. So we're going to do the first section of the first chapter today. So that's the modern situation. And then next week we'll move on to talk about the next 2 sections of this chapter. That's from fate to choice and a plurality of worldviews. And then the week after that we'll do the last 2 sections of this chapter, A Very Nervous Prometheus and the Heretical Imperative. So the modern situation. He begins with an extended example, which is, I think, rather dated now, but never mind, in which he has a Western tourist flying high overhead over Indonesia and compares this man's life with, or woman's life, with some local villager. So he notes that the tourist could spend as much money in a weekend as the local villager would spend in a year. They live on the same planet, but in different worlds. The tourist is like a god. His personal space is measured in thousands of miles. The villagers, by the distance a bullock cart can go. That would no longer be true today, I think. His time is precise, like an airline schedule. Theirs by the seasons of nature and the human body. He moves with a breathtaking speed, they with the slow rhythms of tradition. He hurls himself into an open future. They move in careful connection with the ancestral past. He has vast social and physical power. They have little. He is likely to live much longer than them. For the villagers, modernity is the advent of a new world of mythological potency. Modernization, for Berger, is the juxtaposition of these 2 different worlds, a cataclysmic and unprecedented event in human history. Not only is the jet traveler more privileged and powerful than the villager, he has many more choices, and this question of choice is very central to Berger's book. He can change his destination and much else. Not all modern men, of course, have the same range of choices. Poor New Yorkers have less choices than the rich, but all modern people have choices unimaginable to those in a pre-modern society in terms of things like occupation, place of residence, marriage, the number of children they may have, the leisure activities they may engage in, the acquisition of material goods, their moral and ideological lifestyle, and their religion. And so he then gives a technological definition, essentially, of what he thinks is at the core of modernity, following Marion Levy, or Levy, one of the 2, in which the modernization is defined as a metric in which the ratio of inanimate to animate sources of power is central. Anyway, his view is that modernity comes in different degrees. It's not simply one or the other. You don't have modernity or no modernity in the modern world, but the core of modernity and the essential factor in the process of modernization is technological. Modernization, however, and this is, of course, for him much more interesting, modernization includes economic, political, social, and psychological factors which may vary in frequency. This has been and continues to be the reality we live in. This does not imply technological determinism. The technological revolution of the modern period did not suddenly fall from the sky. It was rooted in the capitalist market economy, in bureaucratic nation states, the pluralistic metropolis, and the complex ideological configurations produced by the Renaissance and Reformation. Very important is the concept that human life is always situated in history. Anyone living and thinking or writing today experiences some degree of modernization. The situation is important here. Our existence takes place under certain external conditions. These include technological, economic, political arrangements and the like. At least some of these conditions are internalized by us as the psychological and cognitive structures we call modern consciousness. Our inner lives are shaped by modernization as well as its external aspects. The relationship between the external and internal aspects of modernity is crucial. The impact of technology of the technology of modernity is obvious. It is expressed in innumerable physical objects with which we clutter our lives. You can judge whether we clutter our lives more now than we did 40 years ago when Berger published this book. For example, the telephone, which is part of an extensive international system, including underwater cables between continents and communication satellites, we can use it to speak to someone on another continent. But that physical device requires our learning the skills to use it, which then become habitual, including thinking in numbers, understanding area codes and time zones, and having an idea of what to do if it malfunctions. It also leads to the development of a particular style for dealing with others on the phone, which is impersonal, precise, and in America at least, the superficial civility. Almost certainly, these acquired habits are carried over into our non-telephonic relations with other people. Similarly, with other technologies we use, modern man likely has a technological mentality, though the quality and degree of correspondence with these technological forces is far from solved. There may also be a capitalist mentality corresponding to the market economy, a bureaucratic mind, and so on. To summarize, modern consciousness is part and parcel of the situation in which the contemporary individual finds himself or herself. We are all situated in the structures of modern consciousness. This is an empirical fact. It's been asserted that modern man or modern women are incapable of mythological thought. That is, the perspective in which the universe is permeated by divine or other meta-human interventions. This is statistically correct. A modern educated American who has a vision of a demon is more likely to call a psychologist than an exorcist. But that's a probability, not a certainty, of course. The dominant definitions of reality that are empirically available to him or her excludes demonic interventions in human life. So one useful question is to ask how many Americans believe in demons. Socialization, education, and major social institutions disfavor that belief. So the individual's probable reaction is predictable. An individual's definition of reality that governs his situation can be explained in terms of his or her individual biography. Modern consciousness has a powerful relativizing effect on all worldviews, and that's, of course, going to be one of the major themes that he develops. Indeed, the history of modern Western thought has largely been one long effort to cope with what is termed here the vertigo of relativity induced by modernization. Different starting points have been suggested, such as Pascal's statement that truth on one side of the Pyrenees is falsehood, on the other is a good one. Modernization is a great relativizing cauldron. The modernity itself is relativized. It is not the culmination of human consciousness. Right from the beginning, two antithetical attitudes towards modernity developed. One, exalting it in terms of the idea of progress or similar optimism, and secondly, bemoaning it as a vast degeneration, a dehumanizing fall from grace. Berger's view is that it's neither, or both perhaps. Modernity is an historical phenomenon like any other. It has both admirable and deplorable aspects and a likely mix of truth and error. Finally, let's talk about situationalism not being deterministic. The possibility of transcendence of our situation intellectually exists. We can think and experience the world outside of the boundaries of our situation. If this were not true, social change itself would be probably impossible. We are situated beings, so we can't avoid being situated in a particular situation, but we're also forever driven to transcend our given situation. People vary in their capacity for this, or their desire for this, I think we might add. There are thousands of dull conformists for every Socrates. Different socio-historical situations entail different probabilities for transcendence. Socrates was more likely to appear in Athens than in some remote Thracian village. The situation we find ourselves in is the starting point for our life and thought, not the end point, so we can predict the likely trajectory in probabilistic terms. This has consequences for modern consciousness. Modern consciousness lacks the taken-for-granted superiority which was common in previous thought worlds. Though note, modern men and women may still think that they are the climax of evolution. But we know that all human constructions change and eventually disappear, or are transformed into something different. We have no reason to think that our claims of specialness are any different from those who came before us. Modern consciousness is special, but so are all the others. We are right to be mind-boggled by recent technological advance, but we have the disciplines of history and the social sciences to put our own consciousness into perspective. This does not enable us to pass judgment on whether modern consciousness is valid or not. The philosophical questions about truth remain, but studying history and the social sciences are an excellent prelude to those questions. So many thanks to my patrons and many thanks to you if you've been listening. If you want to support my channel, you're very welcome. Like, comment and share on the videos. Subscribe and press the bell icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And if you want to provide practical support, then I'll give links to my Patreon and PayPal accounts below. So have a good day.